As you would see, the national movement was not, or rather, the way India gained its independence not simply was a product of national movement, but there were so many other things one could look at. So a lot of moves and counter moves from the part of the government, from the part of the movement leaders. So we would also see there were a lot of strategies and negotiations. They were also involved as far as national movement was concerned. So that was very interesting in terms of we could see that how during the World War II that the Indian leaders they negotiated that in terms of their support for the British government, how India would get its independence post World War II. I mean, of course, the Britishers they were not known for keeping the impressive promises, so them that we all know. But how things developed and unfolded and all those things. Then next milestone that we see in the terms of Quit India movement in 1942. So with all this, we have another eminent speaker to throw light on all those things, Dr. Monish Tourangbam. He's currently assistant professor with us at the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations. And previously, he was associate fellow at the Center for International Relations, Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi, and also a guest faculty at the Ansel Institute of Technology, Gurgaon. He has a PhD from US Study Center, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has conducted field research in the United States of America, including at the Lyndon Baines Johnson Presidential Library at Austin, Texas. He has also worked on the US role in Afghanistan as part of the NATE assessment project between ORF and the Integrated Defense Staff. He has several publications to his credit, including chapters in books, articles, and book reviews in refereed journals and commentaries and opinions in several magazines, newspapers, and websites. So with this short introduction, now I hand over to Dr. Monish for his presentation.
For such a generous introduction. Uh, First of all, I thank again Dr. Verdesh Gange and the Department of Gandhian and Peace Studies for giving me this opportunity to speak on a very important topic of relevance. First of all, I sincerely believe that I neither do have the wisdom or the experience to speak and analyze something like Gandhian philosophy and politics. Nevertheless, history has been a subject very close to my heart, which I studied during my undergraduation, and I continue to study world history, and specifically I went to studying American history at large. I think why Gandhi is important. Even if I'm someone who believes that history should be understood in the historical context and not necessarily try to bring historical elements and put them in a different context and try to make, either negate or, accept them. But nevertheless, Gandhi as a subject and non-violence as a subject has been since I was, I think I did not think about that when I was a kid. But when I reflect back now, I think it has been a very important moralistic dilemma of my life, in the sense that I grew up in one of the most insurgency-prone areas of India, Manipur, where a violent insurgency has been raging against the Indian government for the last 30, 40 years. And it has not seen any solution. There is no sight of solution. And things are going rather downhill. Then, if I look at my training years as a PhD scholar, I have tried to understood the nation-building process in America as such. And in that, I see, again, a lot of references and counter-references in terms of what does it really go into building a nation. America's nation building rather has not been a rosy picture also, right? So if I look at even the characters like Martin Luther King and also the existence of someone like Malcolm X within that same framework, who believe not in integrating with the whites, but who believe that the whites should be different, the African Americans should be different. So I think whether we commission or omit Gandhi, I think the importance of Gandhi is that in our lives, whatever we study, it has a ubiquitous presence. It's everywhere, whether you commit or omit it. So I think that makes it really important in terms of understanding what this particular, the whole idea of like generations who grew up during Gandhi's period and generations like us who try to understand Gandhi 60, 70 decades after Gandhi leave. For instance, you know, permit me this space before I can talk about Quit India. I think because it is important, because when I think about my own place, Manipur became a part of India in 1949, and the existence of Gandhi, the presence of Gandhi in the mindscape of Indians. The Gandhian movement stopped on the boundaries of Assam, and it is very important to understand what Gandhi means, to regions of India which were not a part of the Gandhian movement as such. And how do we bring the relevance of, even though you are being taught Gandhi in school curricula, how do you really bring the presence and the essence of Gandhi into the lives of these people, right? I think that's something that we can take up and discuss later on, because I think the idea of any country, whether it is America, whether it is India, the idea of India is emerging. Nation building doesn't have a deadline. It's an emerging process, it goes on. And as we go along in the process of this 60 plus years of India's existence as an independent country, we are undergoing a lot of challenges in terms of how what is this India? What is the idea of India? What do you mean by being an Indian? How do you really, how do you define yourself as an Indian? I think as we talk about Gandhi and the nation building process in India, these are important questions before us that will either mar or make the process of building an inclusive India. And I think that's an important point to ponder upon. Having said that, let me come back to my prescribed topic, which is Quit India. And a very important phase, I think, and an uncertain phase also, right? Because unlike before, whether it was a Dandi March or there's this different movements that happens after Gandhi comes back to India, here we have a movement where Gandhi was imprisoned for the entire period. He was being imprisoned in the Aga Khan Palace in Pune. So Gandhi was not there. None of the leaders were there. On the early hours of August 9, after the resolution of Quit India movement was passed at the Gaulia Teng, the then Gaulia Teng of the then Bombay, which is now called the August Country Maidan in Mumbai. In the early hour of 9th August, almost all the leaders were swooped away, taken to different detention centers to make sure that the movement did not go the way it was planned. So I think this is a question that I will try to answer at the end. And I would put it here, that the major questions of Quit India movement were whether the movement was spontaneous, really. Was it really spontaneous? The second question is, what about the violence factor of the movement? In the sense that it is a movement which really grade the zone between violence and non-violence. Because Gandhi and the leaders had left a very open mandate in terms of what to do with the Quit India movement. What do we do? How do we really understand this non-violence? If the clarion call was karo ya maro, karenge ya marenge, do or die, how do we really die? Right? What do we really do? How do we really fight the British? So there was an open space left in terms of what is to be done. So I think it was a phase in which different parts of India, people rather reinterpreted the ideas of non-violence. Whether it was the picketing of police stations, whether it was, going in groups and removing railway tracks, whether it was burning down police stations, whether it was attacking post offices. In some cases, even in parts of Bihar and UP, certain Royal Air Force officers were, even lynched, killed, and paraded in the town. So how do we really make sense of this disparate nature of a movement, which nevertheless was a very important movement in terms of that leap forward, in terms of that anti-climax of the Indian movement, right? Indian national movement. So let me begin from the beginning, in the sense that I think the genesis of the Quit India movement should be really linked to the World War II situation, the coming of World War II and the security scenario that was prevalent around the world, and what was Indian National Congress approach to World War II. What was going to be our stand, whether we are going to support in what conditions, in what terms, What is the nature of the support going to be? And I think it is also important to look at this phase, the differences that were erupting within the Congress itself. It was mentioned before, the growth of young leaders, Subhash Chandra Bose, Nehru. Nehru was a little bit closer to what Gandhi thought, but there were subtle differences in what, especially on the World War II situation. Bose had a different idea altogether. And we see specifically the differences erupting during the Tripuri session of 1939 over the presidency of the Congress and what it means to be the leader of the Congress, when I think Bose sort of misjudged the position inside the Congress in the sense that there were people who liked the new policies that young blood were like Bose were bringing to the fore, but they nevertheless, they really did not mean that Bose could really supplant Gandhiji's leadership. So there were certain subtle differences within the movement itself, and I think it was important in terms of understanding how India responded to the World War II scenario, because as there were differences between the communist and the socialist bloc also, in the sense that the communists were more, even specifically after the Soviet Union came into the fray of, came fully into the war, the communists were more in favor of supporting the war because of their allegiance to the communist movement in Soviet Union. So the Subhash Chandra Bose had a very different viewpoint. He wanted to take advantage of the situation of the war and make sure that there was a mass struggle launched at that very point in time. Gandhi started by largely supporting the cause of the Allies by saying that fighting the fascists and anarchists is something that which we should support principally and emotionally. Then Nehru had a different point of view. Nehru did not really, was principally in for the, if he were to make a choice between the Allies and Nazis, definitely his choice would be the Allies. But what was his point? He was saying that we should not support the Allies, but also we should not take advantage of this situation to make it more difficult for the British. So subtle differences in how we were seeing our response to World War II. And I think it is very important in terms of how Quit India movement goal was built up. So one of the important things that we did, the leaders really disliked was the idea that without even consulting any of the leaders in India, India was declared as a belligerent country, as a part of the war movement, right? So as we have seen, that this became a major factor in terms of how, yes, we are not in favor of the policies that Hitler or Mussolini, they were developing. But it is ironic, it is an oxymoron to think that how was it possible for an enslaved nation like India to aid other countries in their fight for freedom. So if this was really a taste of democracy, a fight of democracy, of freedom against the kind of oppression that the Nazis were advocating, should not that taste of freedom and democracy start from India itself? That was kind of the demand that the Indian National Congress put. But as we saw, the Viceroy himself was not in favor of making any commitment towards the Indians. He rather tried to accentuate or rather tried to propagate the differences which were there already within the Indian community in terms of the emergence of the Muslim League, what were their approach towards the war in terms of, as I pointed out, socialists, communists, princely states. So while Indians were asking for freedom freedom for the support that they would give to the World War II situation, here the British were engaging in a different kind of policy altogether, rather a continuation of their divide and rule policy, right? So in one of the statements, I think it's interesting that Lilongwe, the Viceroy, says, "I am not too keen to start talking about a period after which the British rule will have ceased in India. I assume that day is very remote, and I feel the less we say about it, in all probability, the better." So this is the kind of approach that was there within the British government at that point of time. So it thus became very clear that the British government had no intention of loosening their hold on India during or after the war, and that it was willing, if necessary, to treat the Congress even as an enemy, right? So the Congress, it's very reflective in one of the terms that, one of the phrases that Gandhi also put forward in that terms, that The Congress was asking for bread, and it got stone from the British. So, in all probability, the statements were rejected. The major questions that developed in terms within this period was also whether India was ripe for a mass struggle or not. Here again, Bose and Gandhi had differences. Gandhi, till this time, Gandhi probably believed that there was more time to be given to the negotiation process as such before we start a mass struggle. Nothing but we were closely inching towards the larger struggle of saying that complete freedom or nothing at all, right? So, in the Ramgarh session of 1940, we started making it more clear that nothing short of complete independence would be accepted by the people, and failing which there might be possibilities of a civil disobedience starting in India. But at this time, the government refused to budge and took up position that no constitutional advance could be made till the Congress came to an agreement with the Muslim communalists. So there was a stark difference in terms of how the British were trying to play upon the communalism factor and make the point that there were still differences within India. How can we trust one part of, basically the Indian National Congress of administering a post-war India? So Nehru puts in his article titled "The Parting of the Ways," the British rulers believe that in this world of force, of bombing aeroplanes, tanks, and armed men, how weak we are, why trouble about us? But perhaps even in this world of armed conflict, there is such a thing as the spirit of men and the spirit of the nation, which is neither ignorable nor weak, and which may not be ignored save at peril. So this is the kind of viewpoint that is slowly developing within the Indian National Congress. So there is a developing resistance in terms of how we were viewing World War II scenario and how the British were viewing World War II scenario, and